His Scattering Calamity is a spell that conjures chaining lightning projectiles that fire after a delay and ramp up their damage for each projectile fired in the volley. It's very similar to Ember Fusillade in that regard, but unlike Ember Fusillade, you don't need to aim at your enemies to hit them. Its innate ability to chain 4 times also makes his Scattering Calamity very good for clearing packs of enemies. However, unless you have a way to reduce your skill effect duration, the delay between conjuring your projectiles and firing them can make this skill feel quite clunky and slow. Additionally, because his Scattering Calamity is one of a few skills that can be rolled on the Unborn Lich unique staff, which comes with a large pool of random modifiers, it can be difficult finding and rolling a variant of the staff that's suitable for a given build. The silver lining is, there's a surprising amount of flexibility in the way it can be used, and there are a number of other build guides using his Scattering Calamity already. This build guide will focus on using his Scattering Calamity as a mana stacking titan, and in addition to explaining the mechanics of the build, I'll explain my rationale for certain choices I made throughout the build making process. Timestamps will be provided so you can skip to the most relevant section to you. Alright, so his Scattering Calamity can be found as a desecrated modifier that can be unveiled along with a few other skills from the Unborn Lich unique staff, which is obtainable from defeating the Avatar of Kulemaak. Its level will always be equivalent to the Feast of Flesh skill which is inherent on the staff, meaning if you have an unidentified Unborn Lich with a level 18 Feast of Flesh, its other skill will be guaranteed to be level 18 as well. If you're not used to using the innate skills on a piece of equipment, you should know that unlike with normal skill gems, the amount of sockets available on an innate skill are dependent on its space skill level, and that the final support gem socket is only available on level 20 skills which require the player to be level 90 to use. The lowest required level for an Unborn Lich is level 78, so I won't cover leveling in the guide, and you're free to use what you want. If you do decide to use the Scattering Calamity at level 78 though, just know you'll need to upgrade your staff if you want that final support socket once you reach level 90. As for modifiers, the ones you'll want to look out for are increased elemental damage, increased spell damage with spells that cost life, increased spell damage per 100 maximum mana, and increased magnitude of Unholy Might grants you Unholy Might. You can also potentially use increased chaos damage if you find a way to convert your lightning damage to chaos, but I'd suggest avoiding it if you can since it'll introduce a lot of extra pressure in itemizing for your build. Other modifiers to be on the lookout for are percent of spell mana cost converted to life cost, and chance for spell skills to fire 2 additional projectiles, though they may not be necessary for your particular setup. While some people will swear by having a staff with increased spell damage per 100 maximum mana, it isn't necessary in order to clear all the content in the game, and I managed to easily clear Uber Arbiter and Tier 3 Simulacrum using a somewhat scuffed staff with increased elemental damage, increased spell damage with spells that cost life, and mana cost converted to life with Archmage alone. As for the core of the build, it revolves around taking advantage of the Titan Ascendancy's hulking form to increase the effect of all small passive points by 50%. This lets it get up to 92% reduced skill effect duration from the passive tree, and allows a Scattering Calamity to fire almost immediately after casting it. This turns a normally slow-firing skill into a veritable machine gun, and the more projectiles you can squeeze out of it, the more its damage ramps. Because we're reducing skill effect duration so much, we can also take advantage of using Time of Need, which heals the player and cleanses all curses and elemental ailments from them 2 times per second. One of the problems I had initially making the build was trying to figure out a way to scale its damage and its defenses since the Unborn Lich doesn't come with any additional level modifiers. I personally don't care for cast on crit, and while it might be viable trying to figure out a way to make something like Trinity or Elemental Conflux work, I didn't want to deal with that, so I settled on using Archmage instead, which introduced its own set of problems. For instance, if you don't use Eldritch Battery to convert your energy shield into mana, you won't have enough mana to scale Archmage's damage effectively. However, if you do take Eldritch Battery and don't have Energy Shield, how do you mitigate enemy attacks? Simple. You use Mind over Matter to have damage be dealt to your mana before your life. But wait, how do you recover mana quickly enough to endure being hit by enemies while still casting your spells? To be honest, I still haven't figured that out, but I did find out something game-changing with Archmage that allowed me to pivot in a different direction. Although Archmage says, non-channeling spells cost an additional percent of your maximum mana, I found out it still applies even when your mana costs are converted to life. Learning this allowed me to focus on using my life for skills, which would then be recovered almost immediately with Time of Life proccing twice every second. My mana could then serve as my hit pool, and I could use mana remnants to help recover and overflow it. There are a few ways to convert the mana cost of your skills to life. In addition to support gems like Life Tap or Atalui's Bloodletting, you can find some conversion nodes on the passive tree, as well as some equipment like certain rolls of the Unborn Lich, Itsiri Splendor, or a Val-cultivated Demon Stitcher. By converting my life into red mana and my mana into blue life, I was free to focus on stacking mana for both my offense and my defense, and the build really started coming together. For His Scattering Calamity, I'd recommend the following supports: Lightning Mastery, Zenith 2, Considered Casting, Sion's Tempering or Wild Shards 2, and Dominus Grasp or Concussive Area. Lightning Mastery increases the level of His Scattering Calamity, which increases its damage, as does the Allah's Desire, but if you're going to use the Allah's Desire, I find it better suited for Time of Need or Archmage instead. Because we use life instead of mana for our skills, we should almost always be above 90% mana, making Zenith 2 virtually free real estate for increasing our damage. Considered Casting provides a considerable boost to damage, and its reduction to cast speed isn't that big of a deal due to the way projectiles get grouped into volleys before they're fired. Sion's Tempering will make at least 1 in every 5 casts fire 8 additional projectiles. This is by far one of the most significant boosts to our single target and AoE damage, but the DPS increase will be invisible on your tooltip, sadly. Because His Scattering Calamity chains 4 times, Dominus Grasp synergizes extremely well with the skill by effectively doubling its ability to chain, meaning each projectile can chain up to 8 times even to enemies off-screen. Rapid Casting 2 can also be a good option, but should only ever be used over other supports if you're able to sustain your full casting speed without running out of life or mana. There's also the risk of overriding projectiles if your cast speed is too high, so use it at your own discretion. For single target DPS, you can swap out Dominus Grasp for Concentrated Area. The reason for this is that although His Scattering Calamity is a projectile skill, whenever it hits the last enemy in a chain, it explodes to deal area of effect damage. This applies even if you're only targeting one enemy, meaning every hit will count as an explosion and work with Concentrated Area to increase its damage. If you need to convert spell mana costs to life, you can also use Life Tap or Atalui's Bloodletting, but they tend to offer less damage than the alternatives. Of course, if you get your hands on Arakiata's Flow, it can be a massive boon to your damage, but it isn't strictly necessary as there are other ways to deal with enemy resistances. Additionally, if you do find Arakiata's Flow, you might be better off selling it to fund other parts of your build. Speaking of ways to deal with enemy resistances, let's talk about weapon swapping. One tech I like to use is to take advantage of the Whispering Ice unique staff's ability to apply a high value elemental exposure to enemies on hit, and scale its magnitude even further with weapon set passives. To do this, I make sure that my reduced skill effecturation nodes are set to the same weapon set as my Unborn Lich, and on my second weapon set, I spend those points on increasing skill effecturation, exposure magnitude, and shock and ailment magnitudes instead. With this setup and the Elemental Weakness Curse, you can reduce a unique enemy's elemental resistances by over 90%, which can end up being even more valuable than Arakiata's Flow against an enemy with low base resistances. In addition to Elemental Weakness, I like to use Thunderstorm with the Shock Conduction 2 support gem to get a free shock on my enemies and increase the damage they'll take by over 40%. I admit this can be a bit overkill though, and sometimes I'll forego using Elemental Weakness because the shock and exposure from Thunderstorm can be more than enough to get the job done. One important note for your weapon swaps. To get the most out of your skills, you'll want to make sure that they're enabled and disabled on the proper weapons. You won't want to be casting a Thunderstorm or Elemental Weakness that'll only last for 1 second, for instance. And you can also save on life or mana by disabling Archmage on the weapon set that's meant for debuffing your enemies as well. To do this, go to your Skills tab and click the arrow to open the Advanced Tooltip page on a skill. The Roman numerals at the bottom of the page correspond to each weapon set, and the skill will be enabled for each weapon that has a checkmark next to it. Thus, if you don't want Thunderstorm or Elemental Weakness to be used with the Unborn Lich on weapon set 1, you'd uncheck the 1 box and vice versa. For elemental weaknesses support gems, I use Cursed Ground, Potent Exposure, Prolonged Duration 2, Heightened Curse, and Life Tap. Cursed Ground works like it sounds by cursing enemies that stand in its area of effect. Alternatively, you can use Deodra's Undoing to try to proc elemental exposure from the Whispering Ice, but for whatever reason, when Deodra's Dark Design hits an enemy, it uses your current weapon set instead of snapshotting the weapon used to cast your curse. This can be both good and bad. It can be good if you're prepping a curse ahead of time, but if you swap back to your primary weapon set to heal or something, you won't actually be able to curse your opponents. You could also use Focused Curse to lower the activation delay of your curses instead of relying on Cursed Ground, but I prefer to not deal with timing of the delay when enemies come out of immunity phases. Potent Exposure should be self-explanatory for helping increase the magnitude of exposure we deal to enemies. Prolonged Duration 2 will help keep our curses active longer, and Heightened Curse will help magnify their effects as well. Because I don't convert all of my mana costs to life with the Whispering Ice, I use Life Tap to ensure that I don't dip into my mana pool. This is especially important for keeping any overflowed mana topped off as well. For Thunderstorm, I use the following: Shock Conduction 2, Overcharge, Commiserate, Potent Exposure, and Life Tap. Shock Conduction 2 will give you the easiest access to shock in your life, which means it'll probably get nerfed in the future, and Overcharge and Commiserate will increase the magnitude of shock you deal by quite a large amount. After that, it's up to you to decide what you want. If I'm feeling lazy and want to avoid using elemental weakness, I like having Potent Exposure on Thunderstorm since it'll still benefit from being used with the Whispering Ice, but I'll admit it's a bit redundant. Rapid Casting 2 is also a solid choice since it can help you get back to casting your other spells faster, though you may want your storms to be larger or last longer. While Thunderstorm and Elemental Weakness are amazing for boss fights with a little bit of prep time, they're not as effective for general mapping. Because of this, you can use another skill like Spark to periodically debuff enemies from a distance with the Whispering Ice, though there's always the possibility you might just be better off casting more Scattering Calamities instead. For Spark, I'd recommend mostly utility support gems since it won't be functioning as a true damage skill. So gems such as Life Tap, Potent Exposure, Rapid Casting 2, Prolonged Duration 2, and Projectile Acceleration 3. Another way to boost the damage and clear of His Scattering Calamity is to use Mana Tempest, since it will increase the damage of your projectiles and cause them to split toward more enemies. But to be honest, although I have Mana Tempest in my build, I tend to forget using it since it can make casting spells feel a bit clunky from draining too much life or mana, and hasn't ever truly felt necessary. If you do use Mana Tempest though, I highly recommend using Efficiency 2 to reduce its cost. Beyond that, feel free to use Lightning Mastery to increase its level, and any other utility supports you see fit, such as Mobility, Rapid Casting 2, and Cooldown Recovery 2. As for Spirit Gems, it's pretty simple. Archmage, Time of Need, and Mana Remnants. If Archmage is at max quality, you'll need 151 Spirit to fit all 3 gems into your build, or 150 Spirit with a 22% quality Archmage gem. If you have a Diala's Desire, you can reduce the amount of Spirit you'll need to 148 if you put it on Time of Need, or 138 on Archmage. As for support gems, there aren't many options to support Archmage that don't increase its Spirit reservation, leaving Lightning Mastery the winner by default. For Time of Need, you'll definitely want Compressed Duration 2 to lower the time needed between activations, and if you have a Diala's Desire, you can lower the time between activations even further, as well as increase the amount you get healed for. If you manage to get your hands on a Nutrid lineage support, that can also really help boost the effectiveness of your Times of Need as well, but are by no means necessary. Mana Remnant serves as a way to increase our effective hit pool by picking up remnants which get left behind when hitting enemies, and also serves as an additional layer of recovery. I like to use Harmonic Remnants 2 to increase the frequency we can get mana back from critting and defeating enemies, and Remnant Potency 1 to increase the amount of mana that gets recovered. Again, that's Remnant Potency 1 since the higher tiers added delay to the recovery, though you can use them if you prefer. If you have any extra Spirit left over, you can consider running your typical support gems such as Clarity, Herbalism, or even Katal's Rejuvenation, but it won't be that impactful since we don't really worry about cooldowns with this build. Mana Remnants is the least vital for the build though, so if you're still trying to fit Spirit onto your gear, incorporate this one last. So now that we've covered skills, let's head into the passive tree. As a Titan, you want to make the most out of the reduced skill effect duration nodes, which are found in 3 clusters on the tree. The first is Near at Hand, which ironically enough is near at hand the warrior starting position on the tree. Next are 2 minor passives, which are nestled between Constricting and Boundless Growth. Unless you want to allocate the jewel socket on the western edge of the tree, I'd recommend pathing toward the northwest jewel socket and picking up the reduced duration minor passives from the north, since it's slightly more efficient than coming at them from the south. The last reduced effect duration nodes are on the north-northeast edge of the tree in the forthcoming node cluster. Rather than cutting directly across from Mind over Matter, I found it to be slightly more efficient pathing to the north-northwest jewel socket and then heading east to pick up forthcoming. Make sure to use your weapon set passive points when you allocate these reduced duration nodes, since you won't want to be reducing the duration of your other skills such as Spark, Thunderstorm, or Elemental Weakness. Once you have your reduced effect duration nodes allocated, you can focus on damage and utility. Because His Scattering Calamity has a base crit chance of 11%, stacking crit on the passive tree is one of the best ways to boost its damage. Starting from the west side of the tree, the desensitization nodes are really solid, but you'll want to stick to the spell crit passives on the top side of the fork, since the ones at the bottom only increase damage when you haven't crit recently, which is the opposite of what we want. The Cruel Fate and Relentless Vindicator nodes near Druid's start are incredibly efficient, and Grounded in Earth and Lasting Incantations can be used in your second weapon set to increase the duration of your skills. Although Calibration provides some bonus to maximum mana, having to grab 3 dead nodes before it makes it a bit too uneconomical for the build and not something I'd recommend. All Natural is a great node for the 5% elemental resistance as well as damage, and it can be helpful having Breaking Point allocated to increase your shock magnitude as well. Storm Charge provides a good amount of damage and crit chance, and although it might not be as efficient as other nodes early on, it can definitely be worth picking up at higher levels. If you have a lot of crit already and a surplus of levels, Overzealous could provide a sizable DPS boost. Erraticism might look attractive as well, but the reduced crit chance can end up costing you DPS if you don't have a high crit chance already, and if you increase your cast speed too much, you might end up overriding some of the projectiles on your volley chain. From the very north side of the tree, feel free to path down to grab the jewel socket, and on your other weapon set, be sure to get overexposure and the increased exposure effect nodes from the flux capacitor nearby. Pure Power to the north can be very strong as well, but you'll typically be better off crit stacking instead. If you need to get some extra stats, the Ingenuity passive point provides 25 intelligence, which will increase your max mana as well, but it can be skipped if your attributes are looking good already. Preservation should be set to your second weapon set, since it'll increase your skill effect duration, and beneath it, Controlling Magic is very good for increasing damage as well as reducing the likelihood that enemies will crit you. From the north-northeast jewel socket, path down to pick up Eldritch Battery, Arcane Intensity, and Raw Mana. Lightning Quick provides a good amount of damage and cast speed, and while I messed around with Branching Bolts for a while and really like it, realistically, we're already chaining enough that one more chain isn't going to substantially help our clear, and it doesn't help a single target DPS either. From there, I'd path toward Deadly Force, for the Jugular, True Strike, and the nearby Jewel Socket for a huge boost to critical damage and hit rate. If you aren't converting all of your spell costs to life through equipment, you can also path into the Blood Transfusion nodes, which are found near Mind over Matter. The whole cluster provides up to 56% conversion though, so you may need to do the math on how much conversion you'll need to reach 100%. Don't worry too much about overconversion though, since you should still be able to heal through it with time of need. You can also choose to use your weapon set points to allocate these nodes for your primary weapon, and spend your secondary weapon points on something else, such as Breaking Point instead. If you still have passive points left over, you can continue to invest in crit with sudden escalation or focus on cast speed. You can also try grabbing the nodes which grant Arcane Surge on crit, but I'm not a big fan of some conditional buffs, and if your cast speed is too high, you run the risk of overriding some of the projectiles in your volleys, leading to a loss of DPS. That more or less concludes the passive tree. TLDR, stack crit and reduce skill effect duration with a tiny bit of cast speed on weapon set 1, and used increased duration on weapon set 2. Grab Eldritch Battery, Mind over Matter, and as much spell cost converted to life costs as you need. Next, let's talk equipment. Weapons. Just to cover our bases here, the Unborn Lich can drop with a number of modifiers, and there's no one set variant necessary for the build. With that being said, be on the lookout for ones which have increased spell damage with spells that cost life, increased elemental damage, increased spell damage per 100 maximum mana, and ones with increased magnitude of Unholy Might. You might be able to get away with a variant which focuses on increased chaos damage, but I wouldn't recommend it due to how much additional build pressure will be added in converting your lightning damage to chaos, at least in patch 0.4, though things could change in the future. Some variants also come with a mod which converts some spell mana costs into life costs, which synergizes nicely with the build, and can potentially increase your damage by sparing you from using a support gem like Life Tap or Atalui's Bloodletting. If you're just looking for the best Unborn Lich staff to use, I'd recommend one with a level 20 His Scattering Calamity, increased elemental damage, increased spell damage per 100 maximum mana, and spell mana costs converted to life costs on it. If you do manage to get your hands on one, you might also want to consider using Divine Orbs on it to improve the roll of your modifiers. For instance, if you wanted to get 9% of your spell damage increased per 100 of your maximum mana, you would need to get a perfect 80% roll on the increased desecrated modifier magnitudes modifier, as well as a max roll on the spell damage per 100 max mana roll. On your other weapon set, I'd suggest using the Whispering Ice unique staff purely for its ability to inflict a high magnitude elemental exposure, so try to go for one with a high value elemental exposure on hit. Armor overview. Because we're stacking mana and using Eldritch Battery, equipment with high amounts of energy shield, increased mana, and intelligence are generally what we'll be focusing on, so if possible, we want to avoid item bases that have armor and evasion on them. Helmets. For the helmet, I prefer having a rare piece of equipment with a high flat amount of energy shield, since we can also use it to help stack resistances or rarity. Ideally, we'll want a helmet with 2 or 3 sockets to slot in Jaquani's Thesis, which gives 1 mana per every 2 energy shield on your helmet, and multiple soul cores of Zolotl, which increase max mana by 3%. It's also possible to use the Vertex, but it adds a lot of pressure elsewhere for your resistances, and I'm not trying to break the bank here. Body armor. For body armors, we have a number of options, such as a well-rolled rare with an energy shield base, an Ethereal Splendor with a high amount of energy shield and or soul cores that can be socketed into it as though it were a helmet, and a Warrior Invictus. Unfortunately, even with a corrupted weapon, Ethereal Splendor won't increase the level of His Scattering Calamity, and finding a really well-rolled one can be very difficult or very, very expensive. For a good budget option, I'd recommend a 5-socket Warrior Invictus that has increased max mana and spirit per socket filled, and then making do with whatever you can for its third modifier. It can also be a good idea to try to get a body armor with at least 48 spirit on it. If you do, you can save yourself from needing to roll spirit on an amulet if you use the Allah's Desire on time of need, or you can get a body armor with 38 spirit if you put it on Archmage instead. Amulets. As for amulets, you have a little flexibility in itemizing for one, since His Scattering Calamity is a projectile-based spell, meaning you can choose to focus on one that increases the level of your projectile skills or your spell skills. Of the two, having increased spell levels is a slightly better option in that it will also increase the levels of your Thunderstorm and Elemental Weakness, but it isn't strictly necessary. For prefixes, you will definitely want increased flat mana and percentage-based increased maximum mana. If you've already gotten enough spirit from your chest, you can forego having it on your amulet and focus instead on something like increased rarity or spell damage. If you're new to using Eldritch Battery, I should warn you that any percentage-based increases to energy shield and global defenses won't end up increasing your mana, since increases to stats takes place after conversion, meaning you'd be increasing your total energy shield, 0, by X%, netting you 0 energy shield. For suffixes, focus first on increasing levels to projectile skills or spell skills, then focus on any defensive layers you may be missing, such as chaos or elemental resistances. If those are in order, then you can look for more damage modifiers such as crit hit, crit damage, intelligence, or cast speed. Don't be like me and forget to anoint your amulet though. If you haven't done it before, the way it works is that if you find distilled emotions from delirium encounters, you can use 3 and anoint a notable passive point from the tree onto your amulet. Each anointment has a unique combination, and you can check recipes for specific notables by pressing Alt while you hover over them on the passive tree. By using a distilled emotion, you'll gain access to the anointment window, and you can instill your amulets with the proper recipes there. Because physical damage can be the most challenging to mitigate, I prefer to anoint Molten Being to convert some physical damage taken into fire, which can then be reduced via my fire resistance. If you're not worried about defenses though, you can definitely opt for something like Cooked instead, which increases critical damage bonus at the expense of global defenses, which isn't much of a downside on this build since we're not scaling armor, evasion, or energy shield. In addition to that, don't forget to improve the quality of your amulet and rings with breach catalysts. Neural catalysts increase the value of your mana modifiers, and if you're struggling to obtain them, you can 3-to-1 catalyst in the Recombinator and get a random one back. Likewise, Delirium emotions can be deterministically upgraded if you 3-to-1 them as well. Rings. For rings, go for as much flat mana, increased max mana, increased lightning damage, intelligence, resistances, and rarity as you can. Breach rings can be upgraded to 40% quality, which can grant you more total mana than other types of rings, but they can also be pretty difficult to obtain. Because upgrading rings can be expensive, some people will opt into using a Calandra's Touch to mirror one ring they've already invested in. Gloves. For gloves, ideally you want a good amount of energy shield and mana for your prefixes, and for suffixes, anything to make sure you're resistance capped. If you still have room for other modifiers, you can go for increased critical damage, rarity, or even use an Essence of Horror to increase your max mana, cast speed, or resistances. Other options include using something like Deidre's Tenure for its increased spell damage, and if you need to still convert some of your spell costs to life, you can also consider using a Val-cultivated Demon Stitcher. Belt. For your belt, an Ingenuity can be a good option since there aren't many good modifiers for mana stacking on a rare belt, and although I'm not a fan of it, Headhunter can be a viable option as well. As always though, make sure your resistances are in a good place before committing to using something without them. Boots. At this point, you can probably guess what's going to be said about boots. Get as much mana, energy shield, and movement speed as you can on your prefixes, and focus on resistances for your suffixes. Because boots contain one of the only ways to increase our movement speed, later on it can be really important to snag a pair with a modifier to increase the effect of its socketed items, obtainable via an Essence of Horror, and socketing Pharaoh's Rune of the Chase, which increases movement speed by 5% into it. If you have open sockets, more mana is always nice provided you're already capped on resistances. Jewels. For jewels, there are a lot of options, but generally speaking, it's better to focus on crit since we're already stacking it for this build. If you can't get your hands on jewels with increased crit chance and or crit damage, you can focus instead on ones which increase lightning damage, spell damage, or shock and ailment magnitudes. Megalomaniacs can be pretty powerful if you get a good combination of notables on them, as can Heart of the Well with its access to crit and extra damage, but these can also be very rare and expensive. One option I'm a fan of is using an Undying Hate with the Desecration to get more stats from my attribute nodes. Additionally, an Undying Hate conquered by Aminamu will transform keystones in its radius into Sacrifice of Flesh, which reduces damage that's dealt to life by 25% and instead deals 150% of the prevented damage over 4 seconds. Although Sacrifice of Flesh doesn't apply to damage that's dealt to mana, it can still be a nice additional layer of defense on the build, especially with Time of Need's ability to recover damage that gets dealt over time. It can be a bit of a challenge fitting one of these into a build though, and I found the least obtrusive spot for one to be the jewel socket near Conduit on the top right of the passive tree. Charms and Flasks. One easily overlooked part of a build is how much of an impact your charms can have on your moment-to-moment gameplay. I personally don't like my characters getting light stunned and frozen, so I almost always use a Stone Charm and Thawing Charm to counteract them. You can also get charms which grant Guard or restore life and mana upon activation, with Guard generally having the most utility. For the third charm, having more rarity is always nice, as is the Onslaught from the Fall of the Axe. Of course, if If you get really lucky or just want to throw currency at the build, you can always go for a rite of passage as well. For Flasks, instant recovery on life flasks is nice for being able to ensure you're able to cast spells. And if you're using Ingenuity, hybrid instantaneous recovery flasks can be good for gaining back a chunk of resources and granting more total recovery overall. General tips and thoughts. You can get more mobility out of His Scattering Calamity by periodically pressing the skill button rather than holding it down. Although you might be tempted to have your projectiles fork, you'll end up with less clear since your forked projectiles are more likely to hit walls and stop chaining to other enemies. Trying to add ricochet into the formula ends up being more investment than it's worth. Disable Archmage on your secondary weapon set to keep life or mana costs down. Certain map modifiers, like being periodically cursed with elemental weakness or temporal chains, are completely negligible due to time of need cleansing them twice a second. Other skills can be used to store support gems without them cluttering your inventory. You can use the Gorge support gem on Feast of Flesh to gain a lot of flask charges for consuming corpses. Overall, I've really enjoyed my time working on this build, and I learned a lot in the process. I really like the mechanics of His Scattering Calamity, both for single target and for the way it chains between enemies, so I was really pleased to make it work using Archmage alone, particularly since this was my first time making a mana stacker. With that being said, the build might be even stronger using Cast on Crit, but then it'd just be like every other Cast on Crit build out there. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, let me know with a like or a sub, and if you have questions, comments, or suggestions, don't feel shy and leave them below. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my patrons and channel members for their continued support, and you can become one for as little as $1 a month. Until next time, take care, stay calamitous. Last Protagonist out.